Welcome to episode 11. Today's guest is Veronica Agard. Before I begin, I just want to say thank you to each person out there listening to the podcast. It means so much. You can listen to Meet Me at the Throughline on Substack, Spotify, YouTube, and Podcast Index. If you feel inclined, please become a subscriber and or follow us on Instagram at Throughline Podcast. Instagram is currently the only social media platform where I post episode updates. I'm thinking about getting on TikTok, but I'm not sure yet. Finally, please share the podcast with anyone you think may be interested. Sometimes it feels hard getting the word out about the podcast, so I'm asking for your support to reach more people. Thanks again for being here, sending you a pink heart emoji. All right, let's get into it. In this episode, Veronica talks about the influence of capoeira in her life, being a Libra rising, a gorgeous photo shoot she did in Salvador, Bahia, Brazil, and her new website. I really encourage you to check it out. Her spiritual walk as an apparition, navigating life as a mirror, as a fiery Sagittarius sun, rewriting her relationship with her body, her legacy work with ancestors in training, including tending to a 7 generations ancestor altar, her grandmother's response to her work, and so much more. I first learned about Veronica's work through her project, Who Heals the Healer? I was never able to make a live event when I was living in New York City, but even just the name has stayed with me. I've been following her other project, Ancestors in Training, for a while, and the name of this project strikes me also, Ancestors in Training. It's only later in life that I've come to feel like one of my real homes is the ancestral realm. And when I die, I'm going to go back home. It's interesting to think about where we come from. For example, our homelands, our bloodlines, places from other lifetimes, if you believe in that. Maybe you are a descendant of water or lightning. Some people believe they come from other times, worlds, dimensions, and star systems. The ancestral realm, which is a mix of knowing and mystery for me, is another place I, and maybe you, come from. This is all to say, I love how Veronica creates spaces to explore what it means and feels like to be an ancestor, and to connect with our blood and chosen ancestors. I can't wait until I finally join her online workshop, Writing with the Ancestors. But in the meantime, it's one of the things that's pushed me toward connecting with the constellation of ancestors I'm connected to. And it's fascinating how different my lineages are, how different my ancestors are, and which ancestors I feel more drawn to. I do have an absent lineage, and for many with absent lineages, it can be hard to know anything about that lineage, let alone connect with the people in that lineage. And if I'm honest, I'm drawn more to the lineages who are here for me and who have been here for me to certain extents. And I think this is a testament to the power of people with all life's ups and downs who still manage in whatever way, even in small ways, to care about their descendants, to care about the foundation, future, and potential of their descendants. So again, grief, death, family, lineage, ancestors, ancestral realm, it's all a mix of knowing and mystery for me. And I'm okay with the mystery. Lastly, I'm learning that how I take care of myself and take care of my health and well-being contributes to being an ancestor as well. And Veronica affirms this closer to the end of the episode when she talks about the connection between her ancestors and spirit team and rewriting her relationship with her body. All right, before I say any more, here is Veronica's bio. Veronica Agard is a poet, writer, aborigine, community educator, and connector at the intersections of Black identity, wellness, representation, and culture. Through Ancestors in Training, she inspires others to honor their roots, build intentional legacies, and envision brighter futures. Known for her warm, approachable presence, Veronica blends poetry, community care, and cultural identity into her work, fostering spaces for healing and transformation. Her journey includes facilitating workshops, curating transformative experiences, and collaborating with organizations and institutions such as Black Feminist Future, Sadie Nash Leadership Project, and the Studio Museum of Harlem. With a digital presence that reaches tens of thousands, she weaves together vibrant visuals, meaningful conversations, and nature-inspired aesthetics to spark curiosity and connection. Veronica is a recipient of the Spring 2022 Reclamation Ventures Grant Award for Healing Practices for Grief, a member of the Liberatory Wellness Network, and serves on the board of directors of IDHA NYC. She is a visionary muse and multifaceted creative, rooted in the power of ancestral healing and joyful storytelling. As a writer, Veronica's work has been featured on several podcasts and in media, including Black Joy, Connecting Through Circles, and Heritage Journal. From her soulful words to her upcoming projects, Veronica invites her audience to explore the intersections of resistance, community care, and legacy. A joy defender and space holder for over 10 years, she wants to be remembered as a force of nature who created sites of healing. Some reflections from this episode. I have a lot of reflections. I tried to keep it short, but it's so hard. So all I'll say is please take your time listening to the intro and the rest of the episode. Veronica's Capricorn stellium, influencing the expression of her Sagittarius sun. If you don't know by now, I'm an astro nerd. I love learning about all things astrology and have read close to 15 people's charts in my budding astrology practice, which I'm putting on hold for a little bit so I can reimagine how I want to offer my services. But that's all to say, I am an astrologer, and I can't help but add some astrology into the mix with this podcast. In different parts of the episode, Veronica and I, who are around the same age, share a little bit about our astrology. You gotta listen to the episode to hear what we have in common. I will say one thing though. Veronica describes how her Capricorn placements influence the way her Sagittarius sun expresses itself or shines. And I thought that was interesting. I've spent a lot of time thinking about the strength and quality of light from my own sun and how I express myself based on the house my natal sun sign is in, which I believe is determined partly or largely by my birth story and the types of consciousness in my family. I will share more about this in the next episode. Doing deep, profound, and meaningful work, but also being a goofball at the end of the day. Veronica talks about how, at the end of the day of doing deep, profound, and meaningful work with ancestors in training, that she is still a goofball. It's another great reminder that people are multidimensional. There are so many prismatic sides to that one person you turn to for insight, guidance, wisdom, or makeup advice and fashion inspiration. You might see only one or a few dimensions of that person, and this experience itself, witnessing the different dimensions of other people, let alone witnessing the various dimensions of yourself, can be fascinating. But remember that people are multidimensional and that their dimensions change, and there are parts of people we may never see or get to know. I've said it several times on my Instagram that people truly are prismatic. For example, I choose to share my perspective online primarily through a watery lens, but there's so much more to who I am and what I'm interested in. I think it's all of our responsibility to remember that people are prismatic. Mirrors, navigating life as a mirror, projections, and water and power. It's only episode 11, and mirrors have come up several times on the podcast. Veronica talks about navigating life as a mirror, and I relate my experience navigating life as a mirror too. I tend to mainly associate mirrors with water, but I think there are mirrors everywhere. My shoulder bag is a mirror. My living space is a mirror. What shows up on my Spotify playlist is a mirror. When I do look in a mirror, I see myself. Another mirror experience is when someone reflects something back to me that they notice about me, and that could be a compliment and or feedback. Veronica also talks about projections. And I found myself looking up the definition of projection, of a projection. A quick Google search led me to Psychology Today, which says a projection is the process of displacing one's feelings onto a different person, animal, or object. The term is most commonly used to describe defensive projection, attributing one's own unacceptable urges to another. For example, if someone continuously bullies and ridicules a peer about his insecurities, the bully might be projecting his own struggle with self-esteem onto the other person. Now, this is just, one quick Google search, one quick definition. I'm sure that there are other definitions and, meanings, interpretations, research on projection. I just wanted to share this really quickly. Now, I don't know anyone else's experiences, but I bet many people have both experienced the projections of others and projected onto other people. Projections can be annoying, disruptive, illuminating. Enter your own word. Knowing that projections show up in human experience could encourage us to practice recognizing projections, but I think what I'm really trying to say is that projections seem to be a part of like the human experience. And it's just interesting to like observe that. I share with Veronica how when I navigate life as a mirror, I tend to have experiences where people need to have power over me. My thoughts on that are that people who need to have power over me, which shows up in different ways, um, those folks struggle with a sense of power in their own lives. Now, this could be a projection, but I also think, again, based on my personal experiences, that it's also true. Power dynamics isn't something that I'm only dealing with or that's unique to me. I believe there are tons of people out there who are one, noticing what today's cultures and societies deem powerful, two, grappling with in person and online local to federal power dynamics, and three, folks are having their own experiences where they feel someone, for whatever reason, needs to have power over them, and or they, for whatever reason, need to have power over someone else. It seems like power is always playing out some way, somehow. Uh, I'm just sharing thoughts here. Just sharing thoughts. But what I do know for sure is that water is a great teacher when it comes to power. And I think water can help us reflect more on power on the micro to macro level and heal power wounds. Yeah. You know, there's so much to say, so much more to say. And I actually deleted a whole chunk of what I wanted to say because I'm like, this is too long. I'm trying to make the intros shorter because I don't know how people feel about the intros. Because I'm like, people come to the episodes, they see it's like 2 hours long. That might turn people off, but it's sometimes it's it's so hard to like, I don't know. I'm trying to be more concise. But I also tell folks to take your time with the episodes. I know folks are busy and everyone doesn't have time to listen to a 2-hour episode. So that's why I say please take your time. If you got to listen to one part of the episode on Monday and the next part on Friday, do whatever feels best in get in, moving through the episode. But thank you for being here. Thank you for sticking with me on this new podcast journey. Um, and finally, I just want to say Veronica and I agreed at the end of the episode that there needs to be a part two. So stay tuned. All right, listeners, if you can /want to, please take your time listening to this episode. Make a cup of tea at home, find a cozy cafe, or listen on the go. Either way, I hope you find at least one thing in this episode that is interesting, sparks your curiosity, is helpful, or inspiring in some way. Until next time. Welcome to the podcast, Veronica. I'm so excited to talk to you. As always, I want to start off by asking, how are you doing?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'm doing all right. I'm thinking a lot about how it's year nine and just the all the things all at once. Very much in a space of, as always, trying to find my center or the eye of the storm because like there's storms afoot. Um, and unfortunately, whether it's like a personal storm or just thinking about the current geopolitical moment of like all the many different things that people are grieving both individually and collectively. Especially as someone who shows up for other people, I have to often be like, if I get caught up in it, I'm like, all right, I've done my dose. I've been informed, and now I got to go back to the eye of the storm, right? And not being afraid of the storm, and understanding, especially in this year nine, especially in the year of the snake and the lunar in the lunar New Year traditions, as like the storm is here, the storms are already coming, especially depending on who you speak to. Um, so I've just been trying to find my eye of the storm and make sure that um I show up intentionally, and that I, retreat when I need to.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. The eye of the storm. Mm,
Yeah.
that's definitely something I'm going to be thinking about for myself.
Hmm.
Thank you. Well, my first question is, I noticed, and we were just talking about this before I pressed record, I noticed that you travel to Brazil often
Hmm.
and you've attended the Yemanja festival. So
Hmm.
first, I'm like, first of all, there's just seems to be many people in my life who I know to varying degrees all go to Brazil. And so I'm just curious, what brings you to Brazil and what is that festival like?
So this is a very long story, and I'm like, I know we have time, but I'm like, all right, how do I not shorten it in a way that cheapens it? So I gotta go back to 2016. That's when I was training in capoeira regional, which is, for folks that don't know what capoeira is a Afro-Brazilian martial art practice that was first started um, by enslaved Africans who were brought to Brazil. Um, if folks don't know this, also, like, slavery in Brazil lasted the longest on this side of the world in the Western Hemisphere, and it lasted the longest. It only ended until like 1880 something, I want to say, like 1888, something like that. Like, not that far ago, not that long ago at all in the scheme of things. And um, capoeira was criminalized for quite some time, and of course, demonized, because people who were in the business of liberating themselves, especially in the quilombos, which are um, Brazilian maroon societies, is what we would call it, akin to what Queen Nanny and her folks did in Jamaica. Um, I say all that to say I was training with a friend of mine, Nick, who was a formado in a particular capoeira group, and we were talking, broadly speaking, about Bahia, which is one of the states in Brazil, which culturally is often described as like the black heart of Brazil, as in like there's so many black folks and black descended folks there. And our trainer at the time is from that region as well. And the master of that group, Kiki, he said to me one time, he was like, Veronica, because you are a Black woman, you have more of an ancestral claim to capoeira than anybody else in the group because you are Black, right? And so at that point, we were just talking broadly about the culture of Bahia and how it's different than some of the other states and regions in Brazil. And he gave me a book that if he ever hears this, I'm sorry I didn't give it back. And and then we were also talking about some of the songs that are sung in capoeira and how a lot of them are coded the same way that a lot of the um, African traditional and African diasporic religions had to hide some of the orishas in the saints, if you will, and they had to cover them in the saints. The same thing happened in Brazil with candomblé, and that got translated into capoeira. So, like, singing a song in capoeira to Donna Maria and asking her what's going on and all these other kind of things. And I looked around, and then they told me, they were like, actually, that Donna Maria is also Yemaya. And I was like, oh, well, tell me more. And then it turns out that Mr. Kiki was initiated in the things and the mysteries within Candomblé. And then that was actually, Capoeira was my entry point to the Orishas, which I often cite now as an Avarisha within Ifa. So I say all that to say the Yemaya Festival was on my list since 2016, but I didn't make it there until I made it to Bahia in, sorry, this pause is brought to you by, I've been there a lot now. So I'm like, which year was the year that I went to the festival the first time? I went to the festival the first time in February 2024, but the first time that I went to Gimaya was in March 2023. That was the first time I made it to where all of those things take place. I just didn't make it in time for the festival. The festival is always on February 2nd in Salvador because that coincides when the fishermen, I want to say it's 103 years now, or 103 years ago, they first went out there. The fishermen had a bad catch, like they were not getting the food that they needed to. And folks at the temple said, like, okay, we need to do offerings. They went out and did offerings and they were able to get food. So now it's a tradition and it's just turned into such a cultural export, right? So I say all that to say I've gone and I've made it a point to make that pilgrimage as often as I can and to try and time when I'm in Salvador for it, because it's like one of those things you just have to experience. It's so whimsical and wild to see that many people openly and proudly revering an orisha, especially as someone from North America, right, who sees what our South American diaspora kinfolk are doing, and then wondering both what it is about Brazil that makes it so that way people can practice openly, but with simultaneously with the knowledge that just because they practice openly does not mean that there is not still persecution.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, because when I've seen your IG stories, I've just been kind of mesmerized. And, of course, I can go on Google online and
Mhm.
see images of the festival, but like, I don't know, it's pretty cool to follow someone's journey who's actually going to Brazil and going to the
Mhm.
festival and just getting to be around the people and their voices, the energy, the ocean. And
Mhm.
yeah, you bring up a really great point about like people are still, you can still be persecuted,
Mhm.
even when something's like widely accepted and celebrated. And that's really
Yeah.
interesting. Speaking of Brazil, I also saw on your Instagram stories that you did a photo shoot during a recent trip to Brazil, and some
Mhm.
of these photos are on a new website you just launched.
Yes.
And your outfit, the photos, the website, as I told you before we pressed record, are such a gorgeous vibe. Can you
Thank you.
share? Yes, I'm just like, yes. It's yeah, it's really gorgeous. And can you share more about this photo shoot and what went into creating your new website?
Yeah, so I receive all of those compliments. I for the Astro girlies, I am a Libra rising, so I'm very much like aesthetics. Like, how do I want to adorn myself? What do I feel like wearing? And then as a Abarisha, as an E5 practitioner, that it's like a double thing because I'm like, oh, I can't wear that color. Or edit. I could, but there might be consequences if I wear that color, right? So I was thinking about it for a couple of different reasons, right? Like I'm in a season where I realize that I have to step bigger within my own personal walk in terms of like designing the things and the life that I deserve. I'm also in a space where I'm like, okay, well, how do I also enjoy that I've designed this whimsical path where I'm like, oh, I go to Brazil twice a year. Like, huh? Like, so part of me is like, okay, I want to document the things, and I think that documentation, especially right now, especially as Black and Brown people, is super critical, even if we just have our own personal archives. I have had a website to that end um, for my own writing and for my own things since before I graduated college, which is going on 12, 13 years ago. And I'm pretty talented, but it's nothing like having somebody else who's like, this is the bread and butter design something. So shout out to Lauren and Donovan is Sunflowers Co., Black owned business, and they are known for designing your website in a day. But the trick of that is that they execute the things in a day, but the pre-work is pre-working, as in like I had a conversation with Dalia, who is a wonderful photographer based in Salvador, but she travels periodically throughout Brazil. Um, I just Googled photographers in Salvador because I had this idea. I was like, no, I want a photo shoot. I need more photos for when I'm speaking and doing the things. And because I understand how that goes in terms of having not curated as in like false, but curated as in like, this is how I want to present myself, especially in the digital space. So I was like, all right, I need a different vibe of photos. So I've met with Dahlia. That had to be in November, right after I booked the flights. Because I booked the flights to Brazil from when I was there for 6 weeks, this most recent trip. I booked that right after certain people were put back in office. That was my first big girl purchase. I was like, let me get out of here. I was like, let me
Oh
go
my
take a.
gosh,
I was
yeah.
like, let me take a spin back in Brazil. Let me go where I'm. I know it's a vibe. I know it's a good time. Not to diss where I'm geographically located now on Ramapo Lenape land outside of Lenape-Hoking, New York City area. But I met with Talia and we were able to just kind of have you know, a conversation about my work and my vision of how I show up in the world, and then translate that to imagery, right? And she's great because you can do a multitude of things. You can either do an indoor shoot, an outdoor shoot, or you can be like me and you can do both. So we did once we were like, okay, let's do both. I went to the literal drawing board and I was like, okay, like there's this dress that I've been looking at for a while, this black owned like African designer. I was like, let me go snatch that up. Let me go think about, how I want to adorn myself. Like, what do I want to put in my hair? What is my hair going to do? Is it going to be braided, you know, mostly black? Is it going to be braided blonde? What am I doing? Like, what color palettes am I um, embodying? So like there's one where it's inside and I'm wearing a lot of bright colors and my hair is up. So then we did those first. And then once I switched into the all whites, I was like, okay, let me put my hair down and we're going to do a different look. Like, was pinging one of my dear friends, Jalissa in New York, talking about, like, what's it? Because she's a makeup artist. It's like, this is the outfit. Like, what's the makeup look? And she was like, do this, don't do this. So, like, triangulating between my friend who's like almost 5,000 miles away, and then tossing some photos to Talia, being like, what about this for this outfit? And what about this for that one? And then Talia was translating to Ty, who was the makeup artist, to be like, okay, this is what she's thinking. So like there were multiple, like I was by myself in those photos, but there were multiple hands that made sure that the photos came out the way that they did. Um, and so after we took the indoor ones, when I switched into the all whites, I took my hair down. It was overcast, actually. It wasn't sunny, which was good because then that meant that there weren't a lot of people on the beach. And the photos that I think are my favorite are the ones where I got in the water. And it looks like I'm floating, and I wanted it to be that effect because one, I don't technically know how to float because I don't know how to swim, which is funnier than all the things. They're like, you go to the beach all the time and you don't know how to swim? Really, Veronica? And you're Caribbean? I was like, I know. There's a whole bunch of stereotypes about Black people not swimming. I get it. I participate in that stereotype. If you would like to buy me swimming lessons, if you're listening to this,
Hey, that's
I'm open
right.
to that.
That's right.
Completely open to that. But anywho, so I'm floating, I'm faux floating, if you will, in this little tide pool. And that ends up being those end up being the last shots of the day. And like my hair, because I basically wanted it to look like how I feel at times around being a mermaid. I was like, I want this to feel like not only a baptism, what we think about and talk about, not just in the the Orisha tradition, but also within the Southern Black heritage, right? Specifically Baptist, specifically thinking about wading in the water as a song, but then also thinking about it from the perspective of a baptism, like what happens in Capoeira, where the batizado means that you get a new name, right? So like there's so many different Black traditions where once you complete a certain rites of passage, you get a new name, right? Like even within my walk of Ifa, right? As a Abarisha, my spiritual name is Ifa Shadun, which means Ifa brings joy or sweetness, right? Which for me is a reminder that in spite of, well, not in spite of, excuse me, because of how much I show up in community and how much work I do in community and with and for and by, that I have to make room to celebrate. And I have to make room to enjoy and like find time to um, remember the sweetness that is at the root of my why, So I say that to say I wanted photos to match that. And I wanted photos that I could then have on the website that are representative of not only who I am right now, but how it is that I want to show up in community. So then when I got the photos back, I sent them to Lauren and Donovan and like I did the whole process with them and they're super hands-on, very communicative, like very much like, okay, well, what about this? Like you basically get a play-by-play of how to do it, right? And so I made sure that the photos matched the vibe that I wanted to communicate on the site. And then they just took and ran. They took it and ran. I'm so grateful that I invested. A lot of this is that I invested in myself. Like the photos, the hair, the things, the working with Dahlia, working with Ty, working with Lauren and Donovan, like all of that came together now and it lives somewhere. Speaking of archives, it lives on the site. So I'm grateful that I did that. And I think a lot about, and there's a live on the Sable Collective's Instagram right now, where they were talking about how important it is to think about adorning yourself as like an act of reverence, or an idea of survival. And I think about that often with like my tattoos because I have 8 now. I got a mermaid and a turtle on my thigh now that is just about as big as my jaguar. To which people are like, "Girl, are you done getting tattoos?" I'm like, "Probably not. Sorry, mom and dad." But but the thing about it is with my tattoo, depending on who you talk to, people will be like, "Oh, that's a mermaid." Some people in the Brazilian tradition will be like, "Oh, that's Yemaya." And I'm like, yes, but no. And then at the end of the day, it's really supposed to be a reminder of my higher self, right? And she's holding a mirror and she has a sea turtle next to her because sea turtles are sacred to Shango, who is my primary Orisha. Um, and I wanted something to remind me, like very loudly so, like that I have not, like I have surface level moments, but I'm not really a surface level person. Especially given everything that I do and everything that I walk with, I'm like, you're gonna have to meet me in the depths, whether you like it or not. Like consent, but also you're gonna have to meet me in the depths.
Yes. Oh my gosh. That was a word. Well, first I want to say I totally understand your Libra rising because I'm a Libra MC and I like aesthetics. I like thinking about things visually and I find that I get to play around with like colors and energy and all of that through Instagram, but I also like experimenting with color with my clothes and like, so I feel that Libra vibe, Libra rising. And yeah, it's just such a beautiful form of self-expression and yeah, I just really felt like you celebrating yourself, which I think is important, like there's so much that can get us down in our personal lives and collectively and it's just nice to remember ourselves, to see ourselves, sense ourselves, and for some people, it's more, like visual, and for other
Yes.
people maybe it's something else. Um yeah, you said so much in there that I wish I could. I was trying to remember what I wanted to say, but just that, like, thank you for sharing that. I guess I'm like, I want to do this, I want to take time to, like, think of ways to do this kind of adornment. Um and well, you also talked about mirrors, and you
Yes, I did.
so maybe we could go down that route a little bit, because before you were saying that something really present for you right now is mirrors, like
Hmm.
water and mirrors, and something around, like, being authentic, like being your authentic self.
Hmm. Yeah, and this actually segues to what we were just speaking about around, excuse me, how we adorn ourselves, right? Like, I have been told this recently, and I also have been told this throughout my spiritual walks, like whether it is with a medium, whether it is with a tarot reader, whether it is like on the mat with my Bible out, I end up being a mirror for people, whether that is no matter what the relationship type is. Uh, Unfortunately, that may mean that I experience degrees of jealousy or envy, even if I'm not. There at no point am I walking around being like, "Oh, how can I piss so and so off today?" No. Um, I'm too focused on myself and tending to myself, right? But because I'm so focused on tending to myself and like creating, like I said, like I ended up creating a bit of a sabbatical for myself for like 6 weeks. Like just being able to do that, right, is such a gift, especially in this current geopolitical climate, but especially in the sense of mirror work. I Because I end up being a mirror for people, that also means that folks can feel, and again, these are projections, right? Because the whole thing about a mirror is that it's a projection of us, or if we're holding it up to other people, it can end up being people can see themselves or see what they have been avoiding or see what they, wish that they had more time to do. And I don't experience the jealousy, envy stuff as often. And if I do, if by whatever means my ancestral team is like, because they'll handle it before it needs to get to me, and I'm grateful. Um, but for me, what that ends up looking like is that if I know that I'm holding that up, I have to understand that there's times where, how do I want to say this without self-snitching? Because I'm about to talk about my romantic life. Sorry. It's like, how do I want to say this in case somebody listens to this and it's like, oh shit, I know who she's talking about. Uh, it ends up being this degree of like, and I know this especially given my walk and like the things that have come up, and I'm freshly thinking about this because of an experience I had with a medium who's really great. Because of my energy and because of my walk and all the things, that means that I will attract people who either A, are also doing that work, B, or somewhere in the middle, or C, are just not doing that work and want to, as I describe, heal through osmosis of like, oh, well, Veronica's doing her stuff, so I'm gonna just go be next to her and like hope that it rubs off of me. And I'm like, healing work and accountability does not work that way, right? Like you can be influenced by people, you can be inspired by people, absolutely. But at the end of the day, our individual work is for us. Now, do we need community to help from time to time? Yes. But like this idea of like, oh, well, they're doing the work, so I don't have to. No. Or edit, you can do whatever you want. You might not get to wherever, because I believe in agency and consent and people have their autonomy. But I'm also like, you might not get where you want to get if you move that way. So I have a lot of boundary work that I have to do. A lot of how I adorn myself will also dictate what's happening, right? Like whether I thinking about it this way, do I have my elekes on? Do I not? do I have on my legacies and on all white? Like I had to when I became an Abarisha, I had to walk through what that meant with some of my friends and being like, okay, so this happens and this happens. And like if this, then this, or like da da da.
Or
Like there's just certain things that I could not or edit I could do, but there might be a consequence. But then also thinking about it in the sense of a mirror, like really understanding that unfortunately, sometimes because I am a mirror, even if I'm not trying to be like braggadocious and like holding it up in somebody's face, that can also mean that people isolate from me because they don't want to be seen
it's
and they think that I'm
interesting.
gonna judge them or whatever. And I'm like, actually, no, like I actively deal with that from time to time, where people then also, this is also a projection. People think that I have a whole bunch of, whole bunch of dudes waiting in the wings. And I'm like, actually, no. It's like I'm as single can get. Like people are like, oh,
Mhm.
well, you must have people in your DMs. I'm like, who? It's like
Mhm.
who? Like not that this is it's not that I'm not open to things right now, but I'm also just very much like I know what I need to do for myself and my business and my things. So I'm very much focused on that. Now, if somebody wants to talk to me and wants to court me, fine. But like understand, like I come with some things just like other people come with some things. And I just, you know, um, I don't have time to chase anyone or any
Oop, I
as a
was talking to my
it's like
sister about this
it's
yesterday.
like and especially as a child of Shango, I'm like I would be spiritually snatched up if I tried to chase somebody's son. Yeah, right. So, and then also just in the sense of the women that raised me, like my mother's people are Southern Black, like, and then my father, being Caribbean, but also being military man, being very present in my life, means that I know what it means for a masculine energy to show up for me and check in on me and take care of me. So I'm like, no, they call me spoiled, sure. Like I'm an only child too. Y'all were already gonna call me spoiled anyway. Oops. Like so I'm just like, all right, sure. Like I know how to and then especially amidst all of that, I treat myself very well. I buy myself nice things. I go travel a lot. I go and do
Love
all
it.
the things.
I
So
love
I'm
it.
like, you gotta anybody who wants to deal with me has to outdo me. And the Capricorn Venus in me is like, I
Well,
treat myself very well. Thank you very much. Um, so I just say all that to say it's interesting being me, and all of the different me's that I am. And I welcome connection. I welcome that type of thing, but I'm also just like, given what I know about myself and my spiritual walk, I will never chase it. But that doesn't mean that I'm not open to it. And then in the meantime, between all that, when I'm like, you know what, I'm gonna just, as my godfather would say, I'm gonna just mind my mat. I'm gonna
Mhm.
mind my spiritual things and I'm gonna write, I'm gonna travel, I'm gonna, go to concerts like what we were talking about before. I'm really jazzed because I get to see Kendrick Lamar's Beyonce, Grace Jones, and Janelle Monáe in that order in the next like 60 days or so. So I'm like, y'all want to come if somebody listens to this in time, if you want to hang out at the Grace Jones and Janelle Monáe concert, like I'll be there. It'll be great. If folks haven't seen Grace Jones in real life perform, you gotta go see her. Um,
Well, there's a couple of things. First, I love that you take care of yourself. Like, yes, more of that, and
mhm.
it's so nice to hear that because I think a lot of people are thinking about how to take care of themselves, and it's like you at some point you do have to take care of yourself like on a basic level, but
Yeah.
then to do even more taking care of yourself where you can enjoy life and thrive and have fun, which connects to my next question. But I
Mhm.
wanted to backtrack a little bit because you said a word that I wasn't familiar with. You said you had to talk to your friends about the ecolex, the
Alekes.
the
E
leques.
Elekes. Alekes. Those are that is a word for the beads that you receive when you are an Ifa related practitioner or an African traditional or African diasporic practitioner of any kind. So whether we're talking about Candomblé, Santeria, um, Ifa. Am I forgetting anybody? I think Palos receive legacies as well. They may not be called legacies, and anybody that I forgot, but that's in my heart, not my tongue right now. I'm sorry. Um, but it's a ceremonial thing. So like even within like for me, I have received my hand of Ifa, which is this. I'm pointing at it for folks that are listening to the audio, but it's basically a symbol that I have done the things to do the things, but the alekes have the energies and the correspondence with particular orishas or particular forces of nature, right? So that's what those are. And because
Mhm.
they are ceremonial, that's usually when I bring mine out. But I also tend to wear them depending on what's going on. So like even some of the photos that I took in Brazil my for my brand redesign, if you will, I have some of them on in some of the photos,
Mhm.
but I don't
Wow.
have them on when I'm in the water because in my lineage, you can't get them wet.
Mhm. Mhm.
So there's the difference there. But again, different things for different elays and different walks and different practitioners because we're all related, we're all interconnected. But I like prefacing it with that because every tradition is different. And even if they're all from the same root, how they get expressed because of the ways in which our ancestors were enslaved and brought over here, it looks a little different.
Mhm.
But yeah,
Thank you
that's what
for
an aleke
clarifying
is.
that.
You're welcome.
Thank you. I learned something new today,
Hmm.
right now. And just before I move on to my next question, which is about joy, I just want
Yeah.
to say that I have a theory that's, maybe other people out there are thinking this and maybe you're thinking this, but I feel like people who work with water in some way
Hmm.
or they tend to be mirrors, and that
Yeah.
I feel like I've had in my own experience people need who um how do I say this? I feel like I run into like a lot of people who have kind of reactions toward me where there needs to be like power over, or there's just like
Hmm.
some sort of um like the person needs to have power over me, and I feel like water is a great mirror for reflecting how myself and the other person, how power is in their life. And I think, we're both saying like, maybe as watery people, we're mirrors and we get these sort of reactions, and people might be thinking whatever, but also it's not
Hmm.
easy like being a mirror. Like you could walk
No, at
throughout the
all.
world and people, it's not easy.
No, not at all.
And then you're doing your own mirror work. So it's not
Yeah.
only you sitting doing your own mirror work, but that you walking out, going to get groceries or something, or you're going to a function with friends, and then you
Yeah.
suddenly get you suddenly have these encounters or experiences.
Oh yeah. Like I can actually talk about a recent experience because this happened very recently. Just at the function at the after hours or whatever, and there was this guy who I ended up having to block on social media because he was just being weird. And he went, and I say weird because he went from almost to a degree of love bombing, like, oh my God, you're the type, like, quote unquote, I'm the type that he would spend all of his money on, all this whoopty woo shit. And I'm like, chill, I just got here. This is my former neighborhood bar. I'm trying to, mingle, in my quote unquote, cheers place, right? Because especially because I don't live in the city anymore. When I am there, I'm very much like, okay, let me go see my people that I have not seen in a while, right? And especially as a mirrory person, as a watery person in the function, I also should say for the record, I am a Sagittarius sun, so I'm very much I think when I did the elemental thing, because I have a Capricorn stellium, I'm more akin to a volcano. I don't have a lot of water placements in my chart. Actually, I have my midheaven in Cancer though, so a lot of people are like, well, that explains it. But I say that to say I myself can be slightly spicy, but I consider myself to be pretty grounded. So a lot of the reason why I do water work or water reference is because I don't have that energetically, even within my spiritual walk of Ifa as a Shango, which is fire. with Oya, which is fire and wind, I don't have a lot of water.
Mm-hmm.
So I need to actively balance. That's the way that I balance myself out. I say that to say, homie in the function doesn't know all of those things, right? Because I just usually be like on some if you know type things. And once I was like, all right, like I'm chilling, like I just want to relax. And I said something to that effect. And I was like, like I've been out and about, I'm wearing heels, which if you know me, you know that does not happen often. So when I do, I'm like, let me go sit down. So I decided to sit down, and homie was like, and I explained all that, and homie was like, oh, that's the whitest response I've ever heard. And I was like,
What? Ooh.
it's like, so now you're negging me because I don't want to dance with you when I already gave you one dance, but now you're floating and you're tapping me and you're hovering over me. And I'm like, please relax. What is it in yeah, Nigerian slang? I beg. I'm like, I beg. Like, please go sit down. Like, relax. Like, uh I don't like being hovered over like that, especially if I don't know you from anything. I'm like, I'm here with my friends, like I'm trying to chill out. Like if I'm chilling, I'm chilling. And I think that that's the thing about mirrors. I'm like, well, not just about mirrors. If when you tend to yourself and you do the work, goes back to what I was saying earlier. I'm like, so it's like, oh my God, like almost like a degree of fawning over me. And I'm like, it's not that I don't want you to enjoy me or big up me, plus one me, all the things, but there's a energetics of like, it's almost love bombing. I'm like, don't do that, because I know myself. Like, I'm not desperate for affection or attention. So like, I'm gonna treat you like how I treated you. Like, relax.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's no need to fuss over me. That doesn't mean I don't want the right person to take care of me, but it's just like, please relax because you were going to move the way that you were going to move before I decided to step in here. I say all that to also say one of the things that has been crucial in my walk has been, especially within the past, it's 2025, within the past almost 4 years, I go to therapy every 2 weeks, plus or minus. Shout out to Soul Care Collective and my therapist, Omi, because Omi be getting all the like meanwhile at the ranch type stories. And it really helps me take inventory of things, what I want to do, what, things I want to change within myself, and like understanding that, how do I want to say this? It's kind of like understanding, if we're going with this water metaphor, when the wells are well, as in like a well of water, or when they're dry, and understanding my own emotional landscape to be like, oh no, like I'm slightly man down, like I've had moments where I've been in the function and I catch a wave of like whatever somebody else is feeling, and I'm like, all right, I need to go home. Like I just was made to feel alone in the function. Like that's nuts. Like let me go home. you know?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
but especially now, since I don't live in the city, my time is in New York City specifically, my time is so fleeting that I have to be very diligent about it. And some of my boundary work then comes into play. It's like, no, I can't do that, or I'm so sorry. And like walking people through, and like, yeah, no. So I don't do last minute invitations regardless, but I especially don't do last minute invitations now. Not because I don't want to be invited. It just means like you don't know what I have to do to get down there. And then once I say like, okay, like, and then sometimes I'm like, people don't want to hear the why, they just want to hear yes or no. So most days I'm like, nah, I can't do that. Sorry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then if people ask me why not, I'm like sitting there typing like a paragraph because I'm clearly a yapper. So I'll just be like, I really appreciate this, but I can't, like, but I'll be around this day, and this day. And then the challenge with that is people don't plan the way that I plan.
Mm-hmm.
So, and because consent, I'm not going to force anybody to do anything. So I'm just like, all right, I'll be here from on this day, and this day next month. Do with that information what you will. And then sometimes I just like popping up on people. So then it's just like I'll pop up on you if I know that it's all love when I see you. So it's a mix of things. But I think that the joy piece and the idea of like tending to myself and like understanding how it is that I want to show up in the world and what kind of relationship I want, and not only that, but what kind of relationship that I deserve. I often think about it in the sense of like, well, if I'm a fiery person, then I probably need somebody that's water to like cool me down when I decide to be if you remember this movie, Angry Birds, the little red one, that's like
Yeah.
like when at first when I'm angry about something, I can sound like that and or I can look like that. But then some of my friends have been like, never seen you angry. And I'm like, that's on purpose. I'm like, that's on purpose because sometimes I just have to spit it out and I have to get it out so that way it doesn't live in my body,
Yeah.
because the body holds so much. And then speaking of the body, one of the things that I've been thinking about a lot lately, and then I'll pause after this, is something that I synthesized at Ancestors in Training, and then I've said it again in some of my more recent writing, is that if we are a constellation, if we're water based, right? We're mostly water. Then also, if we are a combination, a constellation of all of our beloved and benevolent ancestors, then, we're walking libations, right? That have been poured out and spoken over and praised over and all the things. So then for me, I'm like, if that's the case, and I'm a living libation, word to ancestors in training, then I can't just let anybody touch me or be around me without it being some type of, on my end, going back to what we were talking about adornment, of how I protect myself, right? Like, so if black absorbs energy, like think about how if you wear black in the summertime, you get hot real quick. But if you wear white or light colors, you stay cool. That's why, at least for me, I wear a lot of white in
Mhm.
specifically
Yes.
for me because it helps me keep cool and it acts as a mirror to any other, foolishness or different
Yes.
energies or things like that. So yeah, I
About
promise
that
it all
mirror
makes
life.
sense. It all makes sense. But when they were like, Veronica, you don't need red anymore because you're spicy enough. And I was like, no. Like again, vanity. Vanity, 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 because I have a lot of I wear a lot of clothes. I have a lot of clothes. But there were some red pieces, so I was just like, I'm not gonna be able to buy this again. Just again, the dramatics of like, and it's like very much like, okay, let me give this away to some of my friends. Like, let me donate some of these. Like, let me bring these to thrift spots. Like very strategic. But that whole the no red for you joint, I was like. But like once I understood the why, I was like, all right, that tracks. But also why? Because I look good at red. It's great.
Oh my gosh.
Just again, and that's the thing too. I want to name like as a as a spiritual person, I'm actually a goofball. Like there's this idea that people have of like, and this is the thing about social media and being perceived, like people may think like, oh, Veronica does ancestors and training and she does this and she must be a really deep philosophical person all the time. I'm like, absolutely not. I'd be playing The Sims sometimes as a brain break, especially when things are happening outside of my control. And I'm like, you know what? I need to tune out. Hold on. Like, where's my 10th generation legacy save? Where y'all at? Like, let me go play with y'all over here. Like just literally tuned out. And then there's some days where I'm just like, do I want to be comical on purpose? Do I want to wear that outfit that I know will get that attention? Do I want that kind of attention at the function? Do I not? Or like even with some of we were talking before we press record with some of my photos, and I'm like, sometimes I'm like, do I want to post all the beach photos? And I'm like, nah, post the beach photos, like the devil angel thing. Like, do I? I'm like, oh, my ass is out in that one. It's like, well, you got a lot of ass, so it's just gonna be out. Like, just the things of like understanding I may show up in the world and do the things, and especially how I reclaim my joy is like, I am a person first.
Mhm.
Like,
Mhm.
I happen to do very profound, deep, meaningful work
Mhm.
and I'm grateful for the response that people have to my work. I really am. But I'm like, at the end of the day, I am a goofball. I be knowing too many DJs because my father was a DJ back in the day. Like if I'm not at the function, I know what functions to send you to. Um, I write a lot. I curse a lot. I've been very mindful. I've been very mindful on this here podcast, but I curse a lot.
That's funny.
I be scrolling on TikTok. But I'm an auntie over there. I'm 34. I feel like an auntie on TikTok because I don't really post over there, but I be really posting a lot. Um, but it's just interesting to me, like how being so comfortable in this body. And I said this on the Take What You Need podcast with Lexi, a Black magic woman. I'm the juiciest that I've ever been in my life, which is my other way of saying like this is the fullest or most voluptuous that I've been in my life. And I also am the most comfortable in my body that I've ever been in my life, you know? So it's just more
I
so
love that.
responding again to the mirror things of like, I'm still showing up how I want to show up. I'm gonna still wear the bikini, I'm gonna still do this, I'm gonna still do whatever. But how you viewers all feel about it or how you respond to how I choose to adorn myself, that is a choice that you make. It's not mine. You know,
Mhm.
especially as a survivor. I'm like, I walk a particular way and I do the things and I be, you know, scoping out the exits and the function because that's what my father taught me to do. My father is a military man, know your exits, know how to get out of there if you need to. But I will say that to say, you know, being an only child of a Scorpio dad and a Pisces mom with my fiery self meant, you know,
That's so
shenanigans in the house.
interesting.
Shenanigans.
Yeah.
But then my living grandmother is a fellow Sagittarius, a Southern Sagittarius of 88 years young. She still works. She actually went to work. She's funny. Sometimes she snuck out the house. The day of this recording, she snuck out the house. And then me and my mom were like, okay, fine, bye. Like, don't tell anybody that you left. What are you doing? We fake press her. She's like, I'm
That's
different.
so
Like, just
funny.
she's grown, big grown. But and especially in the sense of joy, and I will pause for real after I say this. My grandmother arguably is my favorite ancestor in training, uh, because she talks it once I started inviting her to some of my works, like previously at Who Heals the Healer, folks who ever came to any of those circles or any of those events, then you got to see my grandmother in person speak about the things, right? And she, whenever she has her speaking engagements, she puts that she's an ancestor in training in her bio. And sometimes when people are like, well,
Oh,
what does this look like for you? How does that show up in your family? I'm like, my grandmother having a callback to my work and her work is like one of the, like, if I do nothing else, like if I like decided, all right, that's a wrap, like I would feel content because of the impact that it's had in my family and like the some of the things that I have been keyed into once I started talking about ancestral veneration and those kind of things, right? Because it meant that my family, and this is a podcast episode for another time, that meant that my family let me in on some things that they grew up with or walked with or saw as children or as younger people. And I was like, oh, I'm not the only witchy one. What you mean? You could have told me this when I was
mhm.
younger, and I
Yeah.
wouldn't have felt goofy. Um,
Right?
but it's okay. You learn everything you're supposed to learn in divine time. But it was just one of those like, well, why didn't I was like, no, you weren't supposed to know that then, you know? But it's a gift to
Wow.
know that now and to still have, you know, to have the language. And it's not lost on me, especially because some people have to hide their things from their families and or have complications and complicated relationships with family and therefore have to curate what that looks like for them.
Mhm. Wow. Yeah, there was like so much that I resonated in what you shared. Just to say that, yeah, with the mirrors, the water in the mirrors, that
Mm-hmm.
it's just interesting what you can experience, what it shows. And yeah, shout out to the fire signs, the fire in our astrology. I'm a
Mm-hmm.
Sagittarius rising. I feel like you are a different like I'm going to be 34 this year, and I feel like we're like an interesting combination because I have a
Mm-hmm.
Capricorn stellium. I'm not a Sagittarius sun, but I'm a Sagittarius rising, you know? So I don't know.
Yeah, my cap stellium be keeping me from being a stereotypical Sagittarius. That's how I usually describe it. Because the cap in me is like, yes, go back to Brazil, but get your money up.
Yeah. Yeah, Capricorn doesn't play.
No.
I feel like I still have a lot to learn. I have a lot of Saturnian lessons that
Hmm.
I I'm a really a late bloomer. I'm like a late bloomer and trying to figure that out. Um but also there was something that I wanted to say. Let me see if I can remember what you said. It was just on the tip of my tongue. Darn. Maybe it'll
Sorry,
come back.
I was spitting, so that's why I was like, oops, let me, I kept saying to myself, I was like, pause, pause. That was a lot.
Maybe you should come back to me. Well, you actually answered a couple of my questions,
Hmm.
which is good because I was going to ask about joy. I did
Hmm.
want you to expand more on like. Oh wait, this is it. So first of all, I like how you said, you do ancestors in training, you explore spirituality, you do deep thinking, but you're also really playful. And I think that's really important because I think sometimes, yeah, it's important for ourselves and people to know that like people are obviously multidimensional. Like you can deep dive
Yeah,
and then go do circus arts or something, or be a comedian, and that you could do both. I always see those memes where someone's like, yeah, I'll be twerking and then I'll be, I'll be,
yeah.
you know, um, whatever. You could be all the things. Anyway, I just wanted to say that, like, that's really
Thank you.
important to vocalize and express that, like,
We shouldn't limit ourselves in a world that's already set up to try and limit us.
yeah, I'm all about that. I'm all about that. Okay, I'm gonna come back to these other questions because I want to kind of hone in on ancestors in training. I know you talked about
Hmm.
it already, but for folks who are new to your work, can you share what ancestors in training is and
Yeah.
what does it mean to be an ancestor in training, especially during these times?
Yeah, so Ancestors in Training is mainly an educational project that centers on sacred traditions, explores it via new technologies, really rooted in the quote by Yeye Louisa Tish, who said, who's the author of Jambalaya, but this quote does not come from that book. And it goes, we are the ancestors of the future, and what we do now will have an impact. I read that in like 2017 when I had just come out of organizing in a collective for like 5 years, and I was trying to figure out what my thing was, because everybody in the group had their own thing. And I was like, all right, like, I think my thing is writing. Um, and I think my thing is understanding where I've come from and like really exploring uh, via gathering questions that I wish that I could have asked some of my now ancestors while they were still alive. So that's how we got to that. And I synthesized that enough to present it at a workshop in the Bronx, led by at a conference called Diaspora Radicalex, as in like diaspora radical, led by my friend Shire Share. They do a lot of amazing writing. They have a really generous, I repeat, generous in terms of how much they put into it. Substack. I suggest folks subscribe to it. Um, and the first workshop of Ancestors in Training was at Shire's conference. It was 30 minutes, and I asked those questions a lot of people, and I've been holding space for people to answer questions like, what do you want your future descendants to call on you for, and how can you embody that now? Since then, I think in the sense of visibility, it's important to name that it's also been taught as a class to youth at the Sadie Nash Leadership Project. This is pre-pandemic times. In the summer in 2018, 2019, and then again virtually in 2021, if I'm not mistaken. And then it shifts, right? Because this is the eighth academic year of this project. So it'll shift depending on how I think uh, it's important to show up. And, there's opportunities to bring people in and collaborate and to do workshop series or panels. A lot of that is archival now and lives in the Ancestors in Training syllabus, which I designed, one, because I believe that citation is a form of reverence and it is a love language. And I believe in that heavily, especially in this era of chat GBT, respectfully, and just the way that things go viral on social media and you blink and people will try to erase you from what you've been doing for quite some time. And for me, that's why it's important to stay true to what I'm doing and how Ancestors in Training looks like for me, while also making space for what it could be to other people, right? So like um our community steward, A Ling, who, if it hasn't already happened at the time of this recording, like is about to complete um, their degree in their graduate program. And one of the things that we co-led last year was an open house, basically, for ancestors in training. So like folks were able to come kick it and hang out and then be like, all right, like, what do how did you arrive here? Like, how did you find us? And 90% of it was Instagram, which again, I'm grateful for the reach and the growth of that Instagram. You know, I'm just in the corner, like, I just repeated what works and did it consistently. There's no secret sauce, there's no formula to that. And I'm just glad that it resonates with the almost 11,000 people that it does. And one of the things that folks said last year was like, oh, you should do a book club. And I was like, actually, that tracks because we have the syllabus and there's so many books on there that I'm like, this is key. And like, let me go read this, or like, let me learn from this practitioner. So I love that that's what we're actually doing now with the book club. And then the other key offering right now is Writing with the Ancestors. I do that quarterly because uh, in this balancing act of my life of like me, myself, the version of me that works and has a day job, because for the record, Ancestors in Training is not my day job. There's an idea that Ancestors in Training is a whole organization, and I'm like, not quite. We're not a 501c3. The profits that we make are either through people buying merch, us being awarded a grant, which, by the way, I want to also be clear, I get rejected from stuff, both myself and like Ancestors in Training as a project. We get rejected from stuff all the time. Like, so in the sense of like doing the work and like making sure that it's affordable to people, that's important to me, but that also comes at an economic cost, right? Like, there's ways in which folks, because we are swimming in capitalism, try to encourage me to, commodify it. And I'm like, no, because it's, at the end of the day, it is a form of creative expression that resonates with a lot of people. And I'm grateful for that. I also recognize people being like, yo, Veronica, you deserve to be compensated for your labor. But I'm also very much team, how do I make sure that I stay authentic to the thing and stay close to my why? And if the why of Ancestors in Training was, this is what I've done around ancestral healing for myself, if this resonates with you, amazing. If not, give me feedback. I'll go back to the drawing board and try showing up in a different way. And I think that that's been arguably a part of the success of being able to say like, hey, like what resonates with folks? Like, oh, you want to do more writing where it's just writing with the prompts and I give you a journal afterwards and you get access to all these other lifetime access to all these other things and you get the recording too. Bet, like I'll do that every quarter because it's I people tell me I'm a good facilitator and that I'm good at making sure people feel comfortable in a room full of strangers, even on Zoom. And I chuckle at myself because I remember when I thought that that wouldn't be possible to make people feel comfortable on this platform. But because I leaned into like, okay, I don't know how this is going to work. Like I leaned into that fear. Now I've had people Zoom in well across the space-time continuum. The last time I did Writing with the Ancestors, somebody came on that it was in Jamaica on the road, but is a descendant of Queen Nanny herself and decided to be on the call. And I
Oh
was
my
just sitting
God.
there looking, I was looking stupid. I was in Brazil looking around, looking at the ceiling. And again, I'm by myself in the little condo, looking around like, yo, what the fuck? Somebody's here from. And I was like, but that's a part of the work, right? Like staying humble enough to be like, whoa, what do you mean this resonates with you? Not that you can't be here, but why are you here? And it's like,
Mm,
Veronica, no, they're here because my inner monologue be monologuing. Like, but like very much like, no, people are here from Jamaica in that example, or they're here from South Korea or Australia. Sometimes I'm like, what time is it? And
wow.
not that you can't be here, but why are you here live? You know, because like the thing about Zoom and all the things is that people sign up, rightfully so, to watch it afterwards. But then when people are live in the time space continuum, I'm like, not that you can't be here, but if anybody was not going to be here live, it would have been, at least in my mind, it would have been them. And I think that once I realized that, I was like, oh, it, you know, no matter what happens in the world, especially in respect to our disabled kin, it is absolutely better to stay hybrid, you know, to do a mix of things in person
Yeah.
and then do a
Yeah.
mix of things online. But especially because of what happened with the pandemic and what continues to happen with, you know, accessibility needs, it's just so much better to be able to lean into technology and let the work speak for itself.
Absolutely.
And I've
Yeah.
been able to collaborate with people that I would not have been able to had I limited myself to the New York City area. And that is not a diss to my beloved New York City area, but it is a reality, right? Like sometimes we can only grow but so much um, if we limit ourselves to where we're physically located. I'm
That's
trying to
true.
think, is there anything else that's important to know about ancestors in training?
Well, I was
Um,
gonna.
no, I'll pause there.
Well, thank you. I feel like I've been following your projects for a while. Who Heals the Healer,
Hmm.
Ancestors in Training. I've been trying to get to writing with the ancestors. I'm going to get there. It's just taking me a while. You know, there's just some things in my life that I know that I'm going to do,
Hmm.
and that's one of them. But I also know that you also, I don't know if this is connected to ancestors in training or if it's a completely different offering, but I noticed that you've also done a 7 generations ancestor altar. And like, I'm really
Oh
curious
yeah.
about that. Like, what do people, if you can share, what do people put on this altar? Like, what is the
That
concept behind it?
All right, so that concept falls under ancestors in training. I did it with the seven generations twice, the seven generations theme twice. And then last year we did it with Dos Aguas, as in the two waters, as in Yamayan Oshun. That is in direct collaboration with my friend Chiquita Burrita, who runs a festival called Brooklyn Brujeria. um, is exactly what it sounds like. It is all of the spiritual, witchy, all the girls, all the girls, all the they, thems, everybody comes together for like, and originally it was one night that was rooted in drumming and historically another practitioner, Nikki of Solting's Botanica, did an offering one year. And then I was just like randomly checking in with Chiquita, and like that year, Nikki couldn't do an offering. And I was like, I mean, we could try something. What do you want to do? And then it ended up being speak. And I said that in the key of there's room for everybody, right? And also shout out to Nikki because she has an episode on the podcast that I cite all the time in the ancestors in training syllabus, and it's called Put the Sage Down. Very good episode. Basically invites people, especially black and brown people, to understand, you know, how sage has been over harvested and how we really shouldn't do that. Like, really recommend that episode. I say all that to say I did the first altar in collaboration for that festival, and it ended up being a place where, especially given the theme of the festivals, but also because of the nights where the altars that I tend to appear are always on the drumming nights, which is, you know, slightly comical given my Orisha combination, but also because it ends up being a very soft place for people to land in the midst of a bunch of other things, right? And especially as the festival has grown, there's vendors, there's people doing live art, you can get your aura photo taken. There's just again, overwhelmingly, lovingly so, everybody with their magic comes to this thing. So that altar, the first time that we did it, um, first time that we did it, Oya was kind and did not have a whole bunch of winds going underneath this, underneath the archway. And we had a physical tent, and we essentially let people write their prayers to their ancestors, and then it ended up being this actual living altar because people left their prayers, but then they also gave offerings. So then every time that I'm tending to, because I say I because Chiquita's running around doing 50, 11 other things, but every time I tend to it, some of my friends, especially my friend Jessica, every year we end up taking the offerings that were brought and we end up giving them to the river. But specifically, um, in that area of downtown Brooklyn where the river goes out to the sea. Or there have been some years where we brought some things CMAR directly. And we just, myself and some other folks just made the trek because we wanted to go to the beach anyway, just made the trek to the beach and brought the things. Um, but yeah, the first two times it was about the seven generations and thinking about indirectly and directly some of the themes of ancestors in training, but last year was about water.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's always
Wow.
fun to see what people bring as offerings, and it's nice for me particularly to take, and this is why I'm really grateful to Chiquita for trusting me with my like I have an idea random ass DM like years ago, is that for ancestors in training, it's hard to translate that because it's a philosophical thing. It's a lot of things, but at the root, it's a philosophical thing to understand that your time here is finite. So then, what are you going to do with the time that you have? That's hard to translate into a physical, three-dimensional thing, right? So every time I do and I tend to the altar, I'm like, oh wow, this is what an expression of this looks like in 3D, and then the people that bring offerings, and sometimes people bring offerings because they see it and they hear about it on social media. And then sometimes, which I think this might be one of my favorite expressions of it, sometimes people find out throughout the festival or throughout the night that there's an altar. And I think that was last year with the water. People came at the end and I'm like taking down the altar doing things. And of course, people come until right when we're about to cut it off, which again is not a complaint. People come right up until the end. And these folks came and they brought fresh herbs and they said, well, we heard that there was an altar, but there was just so much going on. And now that everybody's gone, we can see it. Like, is it too late? I was like, it's not too late here. I was like, give me the thing. Thank you. It's like we're about to go to the river right now. It's like, you got it? You good? Did you say the
I
things
love
that you wanted to
that.
say? Like, all right, we're gone. And going to went to the river, did the things, talked about the things, and then went home. But yeah, I'm really glad and grateful to Chiquita and that whole ecosystem of people. Um, and especially because for me at this point ends up being like a little bit of a reunion because I don't live in the city anymore. So then I kind of drop a pin. I drop a pin to my friends like, yo, like, it's like, y'all probably gonna come to this anyway, like, come say hi.
Yeah, I wish I could have gone.
Yeah,
Maybe I could
but it's
catch.
always plus or
Mhm.
minus, it's always around the spring equinox. But I actually think, speaking of fellow planners who plan in advance, shout out to Chiquita again. I think it happens this year. I want to say she already claimed October 3rd, if I'm
Mhm.
not mistaken. If not, I will correct it. But I'm pretty sure she already said that the night of the drums is going to be October 3rd. Which I keep, when I say October 3rd, I keep thinking about the Mean Girls reference. Forgive me. Um, Speaking of me being goofy, I was like, yeah, drums and the sacred things. And yeah, you're a Shango, but October 3rd is October 3rd.
I think that's the day right after one of my sister's birthday.
Hmm.
Um, I wish I could go to that. It sounds like it's like an
It's an
annual
annual thing.
altar, which is really
Well,
great.
the festival is an annual thing. I capacity willing, all the things willing, and then I'm also very much like team kind of like what happened with how I ended up curating the altars in the first place. It doesn't always have to be me, you know? Or
Yeah.
it doesn't always have to be ancestral training. As long as there's room, I'll do it. But I'm also very much like, after a certain point, it would be nice to pass the baton, um,
Mhm.
and to share it with other people, or to share that space, because you never know who else has an idea that has capacity and vision for something that
That's
people also
true.
need. I think that that's, unfortunately, given how society is set up, and especially capitalism and all the things, is that we think that if it's us, that it always has to be us, and that we have to be the ones, and it always has to be us. And I'm like, actually, it's more sustainable to let people in, even if that means that you're not the one in charge, or you're not the one doing it. Like, that's also a part of care for me, because surprise, surprise, I'm pretty direct. And I'm
Hmm.
like, okay, so this is the thing, and da, 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 like, with room and flexibility as I have aged. But I'm very much like, do, 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 do. Like, I have my ways of doing things. We all have our ways. But I'm also like, yeah, it doesn't have to be me, right? Like, because the same way
Oh my
that
gosh.
somebody else like, I've stepped up because Nikki that year couldn't do it.
Hmm.
There's probably going to be, no, there have been years where I haven't done it. There was a year I had to go to a friend's bachelorette, a small violin. I had to go to a bachelorette in Tulum. Woe is me. And I couldn't do the festival that year. And I'm sure that there were people that did the festival that year while I was out.
You just gave me an idea. That's so true that like you can pass on ideas just like people
Hmm.
pass on organizations and things like that. Cause I mean, I'm pretty sure about what I'm gonna say because literally you just helped me make a decision right in this moment. Like
Sure. Okay.
I've been working on this project called Water School, but because
Hmm.
of work and moving around, I haven't been able to work on it and give it like the TLC that it deserves. And I've
Right.
been trying to figure out like what do I do with this project? Because some of our projects are literally like
It's our
birthing
baby.
their babies, and like I want this baby seed of an idea to still be in the world, but I don't have the capacity now. And literally just now I'm like, well, I can pass it on to folks who want to work on something like this. So that was
Yeah.
really helpful as I'm like, what am I, you know, um, what should I do? So thank you for that. Now, what'd you say?
You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you. So I have about three more questions. We have around 5 minutes left. This one
Mhm.
question I want to ask, it's a little deep. It's a little intense. So this is how I would love to end. I would like to ask this question because this is a question I've always wanted to ask someone whose work in the world is primarily ancestor work. But I also want to end by asking you about inheriting stories and how you rewrite these stories, because there's this one post on your Instagram where you talk about how you rewrite your story through your body. Like I'm going to read it. But first, so maybe since we're coming, our time is winding down, maybe just so that I can ask these two three questions, um maybe you could have like like shorter answers. So this is a bit of a pivot, but
Okay.
I've always wanted to ask this question. Oh yeah, I went through that. Okay, so I hear many artists, healers, herbalists, etc. like encourage folks to connect with our well ancestors, our well benevolent ancestors. And sometimes I feel bad for my unwell ancestors because I feel like in death they're still being like neglected and forgotten. But I've also had experiences in life where like connecting with unwell ancestors can you can get sick by that and it can even be dangerous. So I just feel like I'm wanting to hear more in community and different spaces like about unwell ancestors because it's sort of like they're over there and that's that. And something doesn't feel like complete. Like something just feels like it trails off like dot dot dot. And I'm curious about your perspective. Not to ask you like you have these grand answers, but from your own perspective. Like no pressure to like have the answer, but just to hear your thoughts.
And I can give you an answer freshly because through some of the readings that I've had, and like there's some things that I'm not going to say on the record, but there's some things that I'm like, all right, this is relevant. Um, I think I first learned about benevolent versus like, kind of lovingly leave them there where they're at ancestors from Tatiana Tarot, if I'm not mistaken. Back when I was like getting all the, not on some like gotta catch them all, but like I was getting a lot of different readings at the time, and she's worth every penny. She's been doing this work for quite some time. And she's a practitioner as well. Some of our ancestors, and I'm saying this as a Black descended person, we, especially here in the so-called United States, are often taught, well, actually, that's a slight lie. If we are fortunate to be taught the totality of the horrors of slavery, then we understand how some of our whiteness got in our DNA if we've done those DNA tests, right? So we sometimes envision this an overseer or a master or whomever, that did horrible things to some of our ancestors, right? And that some of our ancestors survived it and then begot descendants who begot descendants, and then that's how we got here. Those are what we would call, people that we, what is it? Some people are dead and they're not our actual ancestors in that regard. And I also think that Tatiana was the one that I first heard say that, and I think she said that recently. Um, but also, it isn't always some white person. There are some people who were alive recently that, did not live righteously while they were here on this earth. And therefore, there should not be somebody that you revere. They should be somebody, this is my opinion, that you send light to, that you send ease to, because they didn't have it in this lifetime on earth. But that doesn't mean that, um, I'm going to say it this way. If you know that there's somebody in your lineage that caused harm to somebody else in your lineage, then you probably should not be calling on that person to protect you.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if they were somebody who was about that life and about that action in defense of their family, then yes, call on them. You know what I mean? Like that's, and I know my, I know, sorry, I'm chuckling because some of my friends have even said this to me, and I heard it again the other day. If you're really connected to somebody, whether it's like a romantic or a friendship combination of the things, whatever, however you're interconnected in this life, sometimes your ancestors will then go talk to their ancestors and be like, hey girl, as if to be like, hey girl, what's up? Like, you see our children out there in the world, like, look at them, we're so proud of them. And I know for a fact that some of my spiritual team shows up with some of my other friends. Um, but I also know, specifically through a reading with one of my god siblings, that some of my masculine or male ancestors show up for me in the way that they do now because they weren't here while I was here, you know, or not like here as in like physical here, present as in like they're present and accounted for. And I talk to them, and um, I have my family tree. I've been had a family tree, and I've been fortunate to trace a lot in spite of what was done to some of my ancestors, right? Um, but this idea that, especially if sometimes it's depending on how that person lived, depending on how they became an ancestor, excuse me, depending on how they, how they passed on, they might not have been well, and also there's a game out right now called South of Midnight that I think is a good case study for exactly this. I've been watching. I'm like I'm gamer adjacent. I don't know if I know how to do those kind of games, but I'm like I might download it and buy it because it really touches on these themes of like, ancestral healing and generational trauma. But yeah, that's what it means to me, and that's how it shows up in my work. Like there's some, and especially when I get readings or divination or something, whatever you want to call it, there's some folks that I know that I just have to send light to. but I
Hmm.
can't call on them for things. Or I could, but it, as you said, it might not go the way that I would like.
Hmm. Yeah. Thank you. So I'm hearing, you don't need to do like some deep, you want to be aware of the potential of unwell, dangerous
Hmm.
and people in your line and to send those folks light. That's what I'm hearing,
Hmm.
so that there's still some sort of boundaries going on, but you're like acknowledging them in this way by sending light. And yeah, I appreciate that because I'm trying to figure out what to do. I just would love more spaces, more conversations about interactions and thinking and processing around unwell ancestors. Okay, so finally, you know what? I tell all early guests if you ever want to come back on the podcast, there could definitely be a part two. As
Yeah, I'm a part two head ass person, a yapper, if you will. So yeah, I'm down to come back.
yeah. Because there's so much to talk to you about. But I do want to get this one last question in.
For now.
You, yes, for now. Ooh, there's like, look, there could be a part three. But so you say you posted on February 13th. I mentioned a cheat code in last night's ancestor and training, writing with the ancestors workshop. The easiest way for me to reconnect with my ancestors and spiritual team has been to rewrite my relationship with my body. We are all sites of great possibility and wonder, the first ancestral altar we ever experienced. Sometimes that looks like deep changes to reset and focus, other times, like remembering to dance, other times, it's stillness. Now that I'm back in Bahia, it's feeling like a mixture of all of the above, so I can feel at home in this form again. If you need me, I'll be refilling my wells and speaking love over this altar. I invite you to do the same with you and yours. And so I just wanted to, like, that was everything. I'm like, this is everything. And
Sometimes I'd be forgetting what I said because it'll be like the ancestors and I, and I'm like, all right, like let me like figure this out. It's like some of those 3 a.m. conversations, and I'm like, so I was listening just now. It's like I said that. I was like, oh yeah, I did.
I resonated with it so much.
In the best way possible because it's kind of like akin to you had a dream at one point in the night and you woke up and you thought about it and then you went back to sleep. And then when you wake up again, you forgot the dream. That's how it ends up being sometimes with my writing. I'm like, I said that.
Wow. And so I'm just really quickly, when you talking about rewriting your relationship with your body, I feel like so much
Hmm.
of what we experience in life is like connected to our bodies, whether
Yep.
it's, you know, just dealing with colonialism, the remnants of colonialism, the afterlives of slavery, like capitalism, all the things that
Hmm.
our bodies, we can describe them in different ways. They're strong, they're fragile, they're, all of these things. So just to end, like, how has it been rewriting your relationship with your body?
It's been interesting. My therapist, Omi, and I talk about it. We talked about it. You and I spoke about it just now around like, some of the shenanigans and like my nightlife adventures, but especially around, like what I've been talking about this whole time through this episode, the through line, has been uh rewriting the relationship also means rewriting who has access to it. It also means, you know, still being open to possibility, open to connection. And I've written about this before when I've been in similar spaces of like, I need to focus on my creativity. I end up being celibate. I end up not dealing with anyone
Mm-hmm.
because I'm like,
Same.
I need to
Yeah.
just, I got to regroup. And it's not because I can't be with somebody, it's just because I'm like, it's not. Sometimes just because I can have an experience with someone doesn't mean that I should. Especially on my rìṣà walk. Mm-mm. But I
Mm-hmm.
say that to say I have levity about it. I used to not. There were some times where I would feel like a bit of a space alien of like, but I realize now that was because of people's projections. and like people assuming that just because I walk with certain things that does not make me a human with needs and desires. And I really a family at some point and I want to be in relationship in that regard, right? So part of rewriting that relationship with my body, not in the sense of like centering men, that is not what I'm saying here. What I am saying here is like, how can I be so at home in myself that the second somebody approaches me and it feels off, I hear it right away. And I hear it in my body, right? Like, what does it mean to hear a body know? Like even if my mouth says something else, I'm like, no, actually, nah, that's not, like my intuition, right? Or like my ancestral team being like, not that one. Or like,
That's
no,
right.
don't do
Yeah.
that. Like, or you could, but it might be fun for a little bit, but it's not going to be fun for what you want, right? And like having that kind of, um, Toni Morrison has a whole book about it, self-regard, like having a lot of self-regard for myself and treating myself as the sacred person that I am. But then like going back to what we were talking about earlier about the dance of, I'm still a human being, but I also deserve to be, even if I didn't do the work that I do, I deserve to be treated a certain way, So like that also looks like that. Hold on a second. Sorry, one of my cousins was asking me about something.
No worries. No
Yeah, I was
worries.
basically saying that a lot of what ends up happening for me is self-regard and making sure that I still tend to myself in the questions that I ask of other people, and especially with what I was saying, and I wrote that in Bahia, right? So like a lot of that ended up being like going to the beach and staying in the water and like, getting a tan, which I'm tan all the time, but I miss my like melanin deep ancestral tan. Yeah.
Hmm. Thank you for expanding on that Instagram post more. And
Hmm.
gosh, there's just so
Yeah,
much
I also
like
had to self edit a bit because again, I'm like, like some of that I'm like I can't have on the record. Like
that's
some of that I was
okay.
like,
There are some things that you want to keep to yourself. I totally hear that. I will end by saying like, yeah, I just feel like you must have this in your chart, but everything you share just feels really like earthy and rich and like
uh,
luscious. Makes me think of like a Oh wait, did you say something?
Capricorn, Venus, Mercury, Neptune, Uranus, Saturn, Mars, and Taurus.
Wait, you saying all those planets are in Taurus?
No, Mars and Taurus,
Mm-hmm.
Saturn, Neptune, Uranus, Venus, and Mercury are in Capricorn.
Oh my gosh. Woo, that is a Capricorn stellium.
Hmm.
No wonder you're doing ancestor work.
Yeah, because it's in my
Well,
fourth house, which is the house of
oh,
home.
well, what's always interesting is sometimes I feel really kind of hyper focused on Taurus as an earth sign, but I never really kind of delve into Capricorn as an earth sign.
Hmm.
So I don't know. I feel like I want to think more about that. But we have gone on another journey. I mean, I've gone on another interview journey with another wonderful guest. Thank you so much, Veronica, for meeting me at the through line. Is there any last thoughts you have on your heart?
For anybody that hears this and they're thinking about everything that's happening in the world, uh, I remind you that we were not meant to know every single horrible thing that is happening in the world in real time. However, because we do and we have that possibility, that also means that we have the possibility for the opposite, for the joyful things that are happening in the world in spite of that. Um, I remind you that you are a part of nature, not separate from it. Do what you need to do to remind yourself of that, um, and to find how to stay tender to everything that's happening in the world without turning away.
Mm-hmm. Ashe. Well,
Ashe.
thank you again, Veronica. And yes, stay tuned for part two.
Yeah. Thanks so much.